Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. That's the main man, of course. Greg, it is conference championship week, and we've got some fun ones. Certainly a three-peat for a couple of NFC East teams, of which I know you are very intimately familiar with.
Yeah, no, this is a good weekend, and I'm pretty excited about these two games. I think my sense is probably not a lot of surprise for three of the four teams, but certainly the Commanders would be viewed as a definite surprise before the season, as they played, as the season progressed. Still a surprise going to Detroit and winning, but I think there is a sense that the quarterback's pretty special, and you know how it works in this league. If the quarterback can become special, and you seemingly always have a chance.
No question that Jayden Daniels has been special through this run. A rare enough thing for a rookie quarterback to have, meaningful success in his first year, much less win 14 games. I know that's not
Yeah.
a QB stat necessarily, and it takes a full team effort, but just the level, the things that you can't quantify, Greg, right? That the poise that this player shows,
Yes.
the level of just general unbotheredness by the moment. And it speaks to, I think, we not to make this a college football conversation, but we touched a little bit on transfer quarterbacks and the experience that gives them, and how much football this kid has played leading up
Yes.
to his rookie year that has at least properly equipped him for some of these moments. Obviously, there's no handbook on how to get through an NFL rookie season.
And there's no, rule book for trait and attributes that automatically say if a guy plays this number of games in college, then he's automatically going to be a good pro. Everything is case by case depending on the individual. But certainly having played a lot of football is never a bad thing. I mean, look at Bo Nix. He played a lot of football in college, and he came in and he played with tremendous poise and composure as well. Now, as I said, you could find examples on both sides. It's not a mathematical equation. But there's no question that Jayden Daniels has played a lot of football. He played his last 2 years in kind of the cauldron of the SEC, which you well know about. And it's funny you mentioned that about the poise because obviously I sit in my office and I just grind away watching tape. And once in a while, but not too often, do I get to meet players, college kids, not too often. And because I don't do that, there's no way I can know what a kid is really, really like. I mean, obviously, teams do all that due diligence, Buck, as you well know. Uh, but there's no way to know for sure unless, for me, I'm speaking solely for me.
Right.
So, I can watch a kid on tape and feel that, hey, either I don't love him or I love him. And then sometimes I'll talk to some coaches or scouts and say, yeah, but the kid doesn't work hard, and then I learn something about the kid. Or they say, man, this kid, you just got to be around this kid and he's just unbelievably special, and then I learn something. But obviously Daniels has something, and I hate to use the word it because I hate that word, but there is something clearly to a sense of poise and composure. There's no question, and you can see that on tape, by the way.
Yeah. Speaking of buzzwords, for lack of a better term, we were
Yes.
doing press conferences yesterday, Greg, and Chad Brinker, the Titans president of football operations, used the word generational talent, and I let out an audible groan that I didn't think
Yeah, I'm a
else
little,
could
yeah,
hear.
that's not one
But
of
I
my
was just like,
favorite.
oh, please God, let's not. But that's
Yeah,
neither
I
here nor
mean,
there.
yeah,
Uh,
everybody's a generational talent until they get to the NFL, and then rarely does that work.
and then, as they say, life comes at you fast, and certainly that.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, I'm sure people will say that about Travis Hunter. I don't know if that's who he was referring to.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, I think we'd all be hard pressed to believe that he's going to play 130 snaps a week in the NFL.
Uh, yes, I would say that would be something that is a bit beyond belief at this point in time. But we'll see where kids like that land and what becomes of the fit and how they're able to impact the game. There's no question he's an impact player, but I call it the G word now.
He'll be a really good player, I believe. And again, I haven't done him in detail yet. I'm just getting started watching college players,
Hmm.
so I haven't done him in detail. I'm sure, just from what I know and what I've seen on TV, that he'll be a really good player at either position. But he's not going to play 130 snaps a game.
Yeah, no, I would say that is a safe assessment at this point in time. But of course, we'll have plenty of time to talk about the draft
Yes,
with the
we
Titans
will.
holding the number one overall pick. And Greg, the preparations are already underway for the live show that we have coming up, as is the annual tradition. So I know that the audience is certainly as excited about that as we are. But before we get to that portion of the offseason, we have to talk about these conference championship games. To your point about Jayden Daniels, 22 of 31, 299, two touchdowns against the Lions. Lions obviously kind of shooting themselves in the foot in that game with the amount of
A little bit.
turnovers
Yeah.
that they had, and difficult to overcome. They did their best, but difficult to overcome, and ultimately Washington outlasted them. This is a much different challenge, though, for Jayden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury in that Commanders offense, because Vic Fangio has this Eagles defense operating at an incredibly high level, and I wonder what you've made of his fit with the personnel that he's had all year long that's helped them, Philadelphia, get to this point.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you mentioned that because there were major question marks before the season regarding personnel. Keep in mind Zach Bond, who, in my opinion, given all the tape that I watch, is a top five stacked backer in the NFL this year. He had never played that position. So that's a major question mark going into the season. Nakobe Dean, great player in college, had been hurt for almost all of his Eagles career. You didn't know what he was going to be. So basically, the linebacker position going into the season was a total unknown. You draft corners with the first two picks. Buck, you know this. You've been doing this long enough. You don't know. You love them. Obviously, I really like Quinyon Mitchell's tape. I like DeJean's tape. But you don't know. I mean, and it turned out that Mitchell ended up playing literally like 97, 98% of their snaps at right corner and had a very good rookie season. DeJean, who was hurt in his last year at Iowa, didn't really become a featured player for the Eagles until after their bye. So it was week 6, maybe that when it was. And after that, the Eagles played the highest percentage of nickel defense, five DBs in the league. They really didn't take DeJean off the field very much at all. So even those two guys, they were total unknowns. You just didn't know. The development of Nolan Smith, who clearly has improved dramatically as the season has progressed, based on what he had shown as a rookie last year and through training camp. And believe me, I spoke to, I'm not at training camp on a daily basis, but I speak to people who are there, and they said he wasn't very good. And then all of a sudden, he just got better and better. So these are things you just don't know until they happen. And But Vic Fangio has obviously been around the block a few times. He's really good tactically. I know exactly what they do. I don't want to go deep into the weeds here because people can't see it, but the point is he's very good tactically as well.
And there's no question the level of impact that he's had across the board, because I mean, I don't have to tell you this, Greg, but in 2023, the Eagles, they dropped 6 of their last 7 games to finish
Yep,
the year. They were 31st in passing defense, 30th
yep.
in points allowed, 29th in the red zone. I mean, it's not a reshaped unit entirely in terms of the personnel, but the combination of the additions that they've made through the draft and free agency, plus Vic Fangio's impact on a very young and formative group of players as they try to retool, get some youth and some speed, or got some youth and some speed on that side of the ball. There's no question it's made a difference. And certainly Jayden Daniels and this Washington offense are going to find ways to test them. Now, we know that Sam Cosmi, the guard for
Yeah.
Washington, is going to be out in this game. That's not an inconsequential injury. Offensive line issues are, of course, always something at the forefront especially when you're dealing with a young quarterback. But one matchup in particular that you're watching from this game between the Commanders and the Eagles, this three-peat from the NFC East.
Well, I wouldn't say it's an individual matchup as much as what I think we're going to see from Cliff Kingsbury, because I think as he's evolved as an NFL coach, when he came to Arizona as their head coach, everybody said air raid, air raid, air raid. Okay. And there's certain things that are unique to the air raid. And actually, the Commanders did one of those things this week, and it was really successful. I'll get to that in 1 second. But he's really evolved. I mean, he's understood the NFL. When he got to Arizona and saw the personnel that he had, because everybody thought, oh, one back, four wide receivers, let's spread it out, let's play air raid football. He didn't really do that because he didn't have those personnel. So he played a lot with two tight ends, three tight ends. Every once in a while, yeah, four wide receivers. But he's become very diverse with his use of personnel, with his use of formations, motions. They're a high percentage no huddle offense. They ran no huddle more than any team in the league by a wide margin. I mean, I think something like 63% of their offensive snaps came out of no huddle, and maybe 62% of Daniels' dropbacks came out of no huddle. So, they do a lot of things. And the thing that I wanted to mention about the air raid, and when I was watching the tape, because, on TV, you notice some things. And, I'm not sitting at home taking notes when I watch these games on TV. I'm enjoying them wash over me.
You,
But
you can't work all the time, Greg. You have
no,
to
no,
take
no.
some time
Sometimes you
to
just want to
stop and
enjoy a
smell the
game.
roses.
But then I notice, and fans listening to this, certainly down in the Nashville area who are big Vols fans, and I imagine that's a pretty large group of people, will know just what I'm talking about. But 6 or 7 times in the game, he lined up with those double stacks outside the numbers, literally 2, 3 yards from the sideline,
Yeah,
which you see the University of Tennessee with Josh Heupel do all the time. It's sort of foundational to what they do. And he ran the ball from it, and Austin Eckler had a 35-yard run from that formation because when you put Daniels in the gun, which he's almost always in, gun, pistol, with that spread look with the double stacks outside the numbers, close to the sideline, the Lions are in a five-man box because they have to get outside. They can't let those receivers just run free. And then because of the Daniels factor in the gun, somebody's got to account for him. So you end up with a zone run play where literally the commander's O-line has to block three people. I mean, and it's just I thought I wanted to get it into the matchup show this week, but there's so many things to show
yeah.
that if they happen to beat the Eagles, it'll be in the matchup show next week when we do the Super Bowl show. But I just thought, wow, that's really cool because the Daniels factor really is a problem for the defense in a formation like that.
Yeah, and we know what on the opposite side of things, we know what a problem that Saquon Barkley poses for
Ah,
opposing defenses, and this is not a great matchup for the Washington defense, who have found ways to stop the run at times, but it's definitely not a strength of theirs.
no, and when I watch their tape, it surprises me. I think there are too many times guys get out of their proper gap assignments because they have good players. They have a great D line rotation. When I say great, I don't mean that every player is great, but they play 9 D linemen, 20 or more snaps every game. And they're good players. They're not bad players. And Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner, Wagner's not what he was 4 or 5 years ago, just in terms of movement, but he's a veteran who knows. And Louvu to me is a really good player. So I watch them, and I guess at times I'm surprised that there's just some gap problems because they should be better.
Yeah.
Um, but you're right. And, there's been a discussion. I'm sure you've seen it all week. People are discussing can the Eagles win a Super Bowl playing the way they play because they don't really have, what what a lot of people believe to be a true NFL pass game right now. But here's the way I think about it. And there's a number of factors with the Eagles. And because I've given this a lot of thought. Obviously, I'm in the Philadelphia area, so I do a lot of talking about the Eagles. Number one, every offensive coach wants explosive plays. You'll hear offensive coaches talk about that all the time. You know how that goes. They get explosive plays. They just don't get them in the traditional, conventional way that we think you should get them, which is the pass game. But I mean, last week in the divisional playoff game, they had 3 touchdowns of 44 or more yards. That doesn't happen very often in NFL games, certainly not in the playoffs, right? I mean, you don't
Right.
see that very often, but they get explosive plays. They just don't get them the way we were sort of, tailored to believe and programmed to believe that you're supposed to get them, which is the pass game. Um, and the other thing, the Bills are like this as well. I don't think people realize how important it is that the Eagles and the Bills are four down offenses when they get in plus territory. So, as a defense, if it's 3rd and 10 and the Eagles gain 7 yards and they're at the 42-yard line going in, they're going for it literally every time.
Yeah.
So, you see how a defense gets excited. Hey, we just stopped them. Everybody puts up 4th down. You see how, you see the players all the time. Doesn't the Eagles go for it? So that changes the way you have to play defense and how you have to play, let's say 3rd and 9, because you can't give up 7 yards and assume there's going to be a punt. There's not going to be a punt. So now your 3rd down defense has to be a little different because you can't give up 7 yards. You can only give up 3 yards. So that changes how you play. And that's a huge factor, Buck, that I'm not sure. And I've been giving this a lot of thought, so I don't want to act like I'm smarter than everybody else, but this is the stuff I think about. And that's a big deal. And it's a really big deal.
No, I mean for all four of these teams to an extent, like their aggressiveness on fourth down. I mean, we just talked about the
Yeah,
Panthers. It seems like Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury are going for, to your
yeah.
point about plus territory, they're going. Like that's kind of been a defining factor of their season. I do want to quickly, obviously, touch on the Bills and the Chiefs.
Oh, no question. That's yeah.
Because that, Greg, for Buffalo's standpoint, the thing that shocked me the most about the way that they beat the Ravens is it was not supposed to look that way because they ran
No.
the ball very decisively on that giant Ravens front. And the impact that weather and things like that have, it's tough to quantify. But that blew me away. How decisively Buffalo was
Yeah.
able to get their ground game going against a defense that's very much not about that.
I will tell you, Buck, it blew me away too. I look, I didn't think they were going to have Josh Allen drop back 50 times, but I didn't really think that they could beat the Ravens D, the number one run defense in the league, with all those interior D linemen with a three in front of their first number in terms of
Yeah,
weight. You know, I didn't think they could just line up and run the ball. But the point is, it's not that they did it; it's they believed that that's how they had to play to be successful. Because in a sense and this is no knock on Josh Allen. We know what he is. But they almost played that game as if they were saying, well, we don't need Josh Allen to be a factor in the pass game. Obviously, he's always a factor in the run game, but that's the way they played the game. Now, it made sense against the Broncos the week before. They ran the ball really well, but against that Ravens D, you're 100% right. I felt the same way. I'm watching the game on TV thinking, wow, they're just coming out and running the ball. They're lining up with their six offensive linemen, which I think they did 10 times in the first half. They played Reggie Gilliam, their fullback, who there were games this year he didn't get one snap. He played 11 snaps in this game. I mean, they pretty much came out and said, we're going to run the ball. And they had enough success. Like they didn't blow them away. It's not like they ran for 180 or 190, but they had enough sustaining success that it didn't shut down their offense.
yeah, no,
I
exactly
mean,
right.
Allen had 16 completions for 127 yards. I mean, that's
It
who
was
would,
just
if you
such a
had said that going
bizarre.
into the game, you would have said no chance.
Well, Greg, it's why box score scouting is such an irrelevant part of the
I
conversation
agree.
for people who try and talk about football that way. Because
Yeah.
like you look at what the Ravens did in terms of time of possession, total yards on offense, how many yards per play that they were
Yep.
averaging as an offense, and then you look at Buffalo's numbers next to them, and you're like, well, this doesn't make any damn sense at all. I know it's a 2-point game at the end of the day, and the Ravens were on the precipice of tying it up.
Obviously the Ravens had turnovers, which everybody will say correctly that they were uncharacteristic. But every game plays out a certain way. Maybe the Bills start to play differently. If thing, you don't know. Those are the things you don't. It's easy after the game is over to look back and pick out individual plays, but there's a process to a game, and coaches prepare for a process, and that the game flow dictates a lot of things. Clearly, and it didn't play out this way because it's just the way it played out. But I guarantee if the Bills came out and every run early in the game gained 1 yard, they had a plan B. There's no question. They just, because of the way the game played out, they didn't need to go to the plan B. I mean, that's the way it works. So, but it fascinated me. It really did.
On the other side of things, Kansas City always seems to have a plan B if plan A doesn't go accordingly, and they gutted it out against the Houston Texans in the divisional round to now get this opportunity to go up against Buffalo, a team that got them in the regular season. Now we know that this game will probably look a little different than that regular season matchup did. But Greg, what as we go through matchups, what matchups are you focused on specifically for the?
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I watch and we know about Mahomes and obviously in terms of their ability this year to throw the ball down the field, they were not very good. It was just one of those years. Um, in fact, I did some research and this stat blew me away. Mahomes had far and away the lowest completion percentage of any quarterback in the NFL on balls thrown 20 or more yards in the air from the line of scrimmage. He only completed 26% of those throws. By contrast, Sam Darnold completed 56%. Think about that for a minute.
That's
Um,
insane.
it's nuts. So their pass game has become kind of highly schemed through formations, through the use of personnel, and you can never discount the Mahomes factor in those critical moments. Never. He's unbelievable in those moments, and that's one reason he's Patrick Mahomes. But when I think about the Chiefs, I think about their defense, and I think about Steve Spagnuolo and how good he is with pressure concepts in those critical situations, Buck. I mean, he blitzed Stroud 10 times in the fourth quarter alone. And there was a three-play stretch, um, which began with like 10 and a half minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I think it was second down, third down, or fourth down where he blitzed every time. You may remember,
Yeah.
it ended with that fourth down play where everybody said they should have called timeout because the clock was running down. But, he's just so good at that. And, no matter how well you run the ball, and maybe the Bills will run the ball great, we don't know. There's still going to be third and long plays in the game. There's still going to be long yardage plays. And they're going to be long yardage plays in critical moments. And that's where Spags is just the best there is. And you better be careful if you want to line up your single receiver to the boundary, the boundary X, what we call him. You better be careful if you do that and he's close to the formation of what we call a cut or reduced split. You better watch out for that corner blitz because Spags is a freaking master at that. When he just brings that corner and that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like almost in the same sense that we talk about quarterbacks, and some have an innate ability to kind of isolate and eliminate and to see what's in front of them in ways that separate them from the rest of the pack.
Yep.
Spags feels like the defensive version of that,
Yeah.
where he just has that innate sense on how to heat up quarterbacks at the exact right time and where to bring that
And
specifically.
clearly, Mahomes has that as a quarterback. You talk about those moments in a game, and he comes through. He might not. The numbers weren't great this year for a full season. You'd almost have to say, and the thing is, they still were a passing team because he had the second or third most dropbacks of any quarterback in the league this year. They didn't run the ball particularly well over the last half of the season. So they do throw it a lot. It's just they have no vertical dimension to their pass game at all.
Yeah.
So they play a lot of close games. The defense is great, and Mahomes is just a master in those moments. That's who he is. That's not going to change.
Greg, appreciate your insights as always. I'll look forward to conference championship weekend and seeing what Super Bowl matchup we get. And certainly that'll be the ground that we cover when next we meet, my guy. Enjoy the football this weekend.
All right, Buck, you too. Thanks.